Is there anything else that you've studied in the last 20 years that could help you become a higher performer with more attention and more focus in your life than these types of mindfulness practices? Or does this seem to be kind of the gold standard for the brain?
It's interesting because when you start looking at the kinds of things that get people messed up in terms of performance. So we talked about where your attention is in that moment, right? So eye on the ball, scan the field, that kind of stuff. The other thing that seems to be very problematic is the story about what's happening.
Okay.
Like, I'm the best thing on the planet, and so I'm going to dominate this, is a problem in some sense because you have a false sense of dominance. Or I just screwed up and I'm never going to recover from this. And so both of those storytelling aspects also seem to be a big problem for
hurt you. Really, if you think that like I'm the greatest in the world, or I suck and I'm never going to amount to anything, having those extremes. So is that an identity issue? It's like the way you shape your own identity about yourself?
I mean, it may be, but what I'm talking about is how that shows up in the moment on the playing field.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because if you go in with that kind of hubris, like, oh yeah, I got this, you are going to start limiting how much you are focusing and scanning because you've got a predisposition that there's no issue here. So you can't have that kind of already assumed success. And you know, this is going to get complicated, and I'm not a performance psychologist, I'm a neuroscientist, but my point is really just that the notion of storytelling in the mind and a over-reliance on the story can be very difficult. Now, the story is not just about yourself. The story is about what you think the intentions of the other team are as well. So we think that this play means this. So anytime you start telling a story, essentially a narrative is constraining information processing in the brain because the brain is just going to default to constraining what it thinks about based on the story. So if I have the view, like we were talking about earlier, we're walking down the hall and you don't look at me and my view is, oh, well, you know, he doesn't like me or whatever I end up thinking about. I am so biased by that I might not notice that actually, you know, you have a bloody nose or something like that. Like there could be something that I'm missing because I'm so like occupied with this thing. Now, in the context of elite performance, you don't want that. You do not want to be disadvantaging yourself because your story is narrowing. You want the full data. And you want to understand that there's a multiplicity, that the other team they're no chumps. They're not going to just do whatever and they're going to fall into a particular way of doing it, especially in this team context. It's very important in the military context with combat itself is that you don't know what the enemy is up to. And if you start thinking you do, you might be very wrong, very wrong. So the drop the story aspect was also very important. And it ends up that mindfulness also works on dropping the story because you are essentially aiming to orient to present moment experience without editorializing.
Right. Let's say you have an all-star son playing college football and preparing for the season, right? He's about to go into training camp for football camp at one of the top universities, Ohio State University. And he has a goal to win the national championship, and he's an all-star player. What would you guide him on paying attention to, working on, practicing on for the month leading up to training camp and then continually throughout the entire season? What would be your prescription to your son to have the best possible chance of being the best athlete he can be and accomplishing his goals?
I mean, I think that's what I laid out in my book.
Yeah.
I mean, I've really wanted to give the best advice I could possibly give to people in high performance contexts. And it doesn't come out of a study or two. It comes out of working with special operators and other kind of elite people where it matters that they perform well. But the thing that's key is that you have to do it. It is like a workout. And that's sort of my bigger interest.
It takes time and energy.
It takes time and energy. And and athletes actually are great for this because as our service members, you know you got to train. You have no... You're not naive to think that if I just sit here, I'm going to be great. No, you know you got to work at it.
Before the interview continues, if you feel like you're not living your most authentic life, not leaning into your purpose, and not living the life that your future self would be extremely proud of, I've written a new book called The Greatness Mindset, and I think you're going to love this. Through powerful stories, science-backed strategies, and step-by-step guidance, The Greatness Mindset will help you overcome all the different challenges in your life to design the life of your dreams dreams and then turn it into your reality. Make sure to click the link below in the description to get your copy today. Okay, let's get back to this video.
The thing about our culture at this moment, and this is sort of my bigger passion behind why I wanted to write the book now, we don't have a cultural understanding that the mind needs to be trained daily for performance excellence and wellness. We don't have that understanding. We understand, thank goodness, that mental health can be problematic and we can work on it. But the notion of a prevention and mental a protective effect is not known. And it's just a matter of time, I'm hoping, especially with more research like the kind of work I'm doing. Like 100 years ago, if you saw somebody running down the street, you'd probably think they're being chased by somebody, right? It was not normalized to engage in daily practice. And there was a lot of resistance to it when people started saying, you're going to do what? You're going to just run around the block? That sounds insane. But we do it. And I want people to understand that everything in our lab is suggesting you got to do the same with the mind. Because you don't know when the next high stress interval is coming around. And we know what happens when that occurs. And for somebody in that kind of elite category, it's going to be demanding. In fact, that is the nature of what being elite means. It's the nature of what being a leader means, frankly, in any industry. You're not there because things are all chill. You're there because things are going to be very demanding that only a few people can actually successfully maneuver through.
And that's where there's risk and there's reward at being in that position.
But advantage yourself by training your own mind. Advantage yourself to get the most data, to be on your own team. Oftentimes we're not on our own team. We're fighting ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we're in a battle internally, and that will definitely deplete your attention.
How important is positive self-talk, like coaching to yourself internally, as opposed to like the negative talk? I mean, we mentioned this briefly about not being this, horrible naysayer to yourself and saying, I suck. But how actually important is that?
I mean, in my mind, again, remember, this is not I'm not a performance psychologist, but what I would say is be aware that the positive self-talk is occurring. So be aware that it's not reality, that it's done for a particular purpose, because you want to have, it's like you were saying, a neutrality toward you. Like if you want to notice the positive self-talk because you want to notice the negative self-talk. Neither are real. They're both an overlay on top of reality.
They're a story.
They're a story.
Yes.
And part of the training that we can offer is to remind people to drop the story and to really distance themselves, to take a more bird's eye view toward what's occurring with more of a self-supported approach. Like Amishi's feeling very negative right now, or, Amishi's feeling really on top of it right now. Both are things that are overlaid upon the actual occurrence of events.
Yeah.
I think that gives us much more flexibility and choice, because then we don't, the phrase is really, thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are not facts. But we forget that we are so fused with our thoughts that they drive everything we do. It's like if you think about the mind playing out a movie, we're in the movie. We forget we're watching a movie.
Absolutely. Thoughts are not facts. That's good. What's the practice that you do personally? And are you as consistent as you want to be with your own mindfulness approach on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's funny because I write about 12 minutes. I like to do more than that, but I feel good if I can at least get the 12 minutes in. And in the book, I lay out this sort of suite of practices. One category we haven't talked about yet, which is its own conversation. Maybe some other time we could have that conversation. It's called, essentially, we call them connection practices, but formally, from kind of the traditions, they're called loving kindness practices.
Okay.
And so this is when it sounds like you're going to say it sounds like I'm doing positive self-talk, but it's actually kind of different. So this is when we have a series of phrases that we repeat.
Like a mantra?
No, I'll tell you what they are in a minute. A series of phrases that we repeat that are not prescribing anything. They're basically offering well wishes. And so, and you start by offering them to yourself, and then you offer them to a benefactor, a close other that has really supported you, then maybe to a neutral person, then to maybe somebody that you're having a lot of difficulty with, and then you might expand out to everybody in your neighborhood or your community. It's a way to kind of expand this circle of well-wishing. And the benefits of that are also quite well known. Very different kind of a practice, but it's part of the standard suite of practices that we offer in the research that I've done, as well as that I describe in the book. But the phrases are like this. So you might say, like if I'm just going to dedicate it to myself, it's just kind of 4 different things. So, and you can pick whatever phrases you want, but remember, it's a well-wishing. It's not like you are this or you're going to be this. It's, may this happen for you. So you use the word may. So, may you be safe.
You say this to yourself.
You say this to yourself
May
quietly.
I be safe?
May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I live with ease. So, you can play around with what the phrases are, but 3 to 4 things that you repeat to yourself that I might wish it for you. May you be safe. And again, I'm doing this in the privacy of my own mind. And
yes.
I'll tell you, some very unusual things start happening when you do this. Remember, they're well wishes. It's not a demand. It's like wishing somebody happy birthday or a good day. It's just, I'm putting it out there for you. I'm not demanding anything. But when you start doing this daily, and I'll tell you for myself.
To yourself, internally, yep. And then to others, yeah.
That you end up being quite a bit more self-supportive. Like, if I want Amishi to be safe, happy, healthy, and live with ease, maybe I don't need to spend 45 minutes yelling at myself for something I just did.
Right, yeah.
Maybe
Beating
there's a
up.
different way I could do it. Or frankly, one of the people that can end up being your close, supportive person can also be the difficult person sometimes. Your partner, like my husband sometimes. But if he's in my practice, if we're having a disagreement and there's a little room for understanding, I find myself extending that understanding. Like, look, ultimately what I want for him is for him to be happy. And like, maybe he didn't mean to leave the dirty blender out all day. Like, whatever it is, like maybe it's okay. Or there's just a little bit more kind of consideration for things, and you're not quite as unforgiving. And so you were asking me about my own practice. So I will, depending on sort of the nature of what's going on with me, I'll either do a focused attention practice like the one we did, or something called an open monitoring practice, or one of the loving kindness practices. But I'll commit to doing whatever type of practice for the entire 12 minutes.
So you do one of the practices for 12 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. And the program that I laid out in the book, which is very similar to a program that we offer, for example, special forces also has those same types of practices. And you kind of build on them. You start out with the focus, then you go to the open monitoring, then you go to the loving kindness. And you interleave these as you go to kind of grow the capacities in this multiple way. It's like a type of mental cross-training.
Ooh, mental CrossFit, I like it. Open monitor practice, what does that look like?
So open monitoring is, remember we were talking about, some are really good for the floodlight and the flashlight and the juggler. Well, open monitoring is really a practice for the floodlight, because it sounds easy to say, oh, just stay open and receptive to whatever happens. Usually we're not doing that. We're like I said, latching onto things. This is a practice, open monitoring, where you are monitoring your ongoing thoughts, feelings, sensations, events internally and externally.
Wow.
So I call it the river of thought, is the kind of phrase that I use in the book. Like, imagine yourself sitting on the bank of a river, and near a nice rock is a comfortable spot, and everything happening, the flow of your conscious experience is the river. You're just going to allow what happens. You're not going to go, you see a leaf and you're not going to go grab it. You're just going to let it,
float by.
It and let it float by. Yeah. So you're taking that stance of stability, non-reactivity, you're self-supported, but this is all transpiring. How can you stay steady in the midst of whatever happens? Rapids happening or blue crystal waters or whatever it is. So it provides that kind of strength of observation that we don't usually cultivate. And we might say, oh, it's really good to be a listener, but what do you do when you're trying to be a listener and you're really pissed at what the person's saying to you?
Yeah.
How do you cultivate that stability of mind? Or you can tell in the competition context that somebody's trying to get you. They are goading you. How do you stay stable? So yes, that is occurring, and I'm still right here, sitting, watching. Steady, yeah.
Wow.
Mind travel. Essentially, that would be like me taking your perspective. Oh, that must have seemed strange for him to see me wipe off lipstick. I mean, he probably never had to do that. I'm taking your perspective on an event. So I've traveled into your mind, and I'm looking back at myself through your mind. So all of these are displacing us in space or time in some sense.